I just lived through every father's nightmare. A spoiled neighborhood bully slapped my daughter in the middle of lunch, and his mother twisted the truth online to make her the villain. Her excuse? Boys make mistakes, but girls should know better. That's when I decided, and they picked the wrong family to mess with. You're watching Tomato Tales, where every story burns hotter than the truth they tried to hide. My name's Mark Dalton, and my daughter Lena had just transferred to Ridgewood High. It was her first day, and within hours, she'd managed to shake the entire school's social food chain. Lena's 16, sharp as a tack and calm under fire. She's the kind of girl who could face chaos and still correct your grammar mid-sentence. We'd already heard rumors about the Bennetts before moving into Silver Pines, a neighborhood so clean it felt artificial. Greg Bennett, HOA president, acted like he ruled a suburban empire made of fences and bylaws. His son Chase, the crown prince, arrogant, smug, and allergic to humility. The cafeteria incident started like any other lunch hour. Trays clattered, laughter echoed, and then Chase decided to corner a freshman for his lunch money. Lena didn't yell or posture. She just said, loud enough for a few tables to hear, "Wow. Haven't seen a mugging that sloppy since Dad tried to fix the dishwasher." The laughter that followed could have powered a stadium. Chase froze, cheeks flaming red. He wasn't used to being laughed at. He stomped over. "You think you're funny, new girl?" Lena took a bite of her apple, slow, deliberate. "Funnier than you, apparently." A few kids snorted. That's all it took. Chase's hand flew up and cracked across her face. Silence. Utter, awful silence. Lena turned her head back, calm, steady, dangerous. "Nice swing," she said. "Want to try again with an audience?" A teacher's voice sliced through the air. "Both of you, office now." 30 minutes later, my phone rang and my world tilted. I sped to the school, heart hammering, every instinct in me ready to protect my child. But I had no idea that slap wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something much darker. Because when powerful people get exposed, they don't apologize. They retaliate. The next morning, our mailbox had a message, one that would turn our neighborhood into a battlefield. Don't miss what happened next. Hit subscribe and stay with Tomato Tales as the fight for truth begins. The school called it a peer disagreement. That was their word for a boy slapping my daughter in front of an entire cafeteria. When I arrived, my wife Sarah was already in the principal's office, calm, collected, dangerous in her silence. Lena sat beside her, tapping a pen against her knee, looking like she was waiting for the universe to catch up. "Are you hurt?" I asked. She shrugged. "Barely felt it." What's annoying is how unoriginal it was. That's Lena, turning trauma into sarcasm before the bruise even forms. The vice principal cleared his throat. "Both students have been given a 3-day suspension. We're treating this as a mutual disagreement." Sarah's pen stopped moving. She looked up, voice sharp as glass. "A disagreement?" He hit her. The man adjusted his tie. "It's school policy to—" "Policy," she interrupted, "is supposed to protect students, not excuse violence." I could feel the room tighten. But Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She just stood, gathered her notes, and said, "We'll be requesting a written report." We left the office together. No shouting, no scene, just cold precision. That night at dinner, Sarah had her notebook open again. "Timeline," she said. "Slap at 12:08, VP call at 1:13. Email for official report sent at 6:09. Lena twirled spaghetti around her fork. "Add a note about their cafeteria food. It's a bigger crime than the slap." We laughed, and the kind of laugh families use to push back the anger. Sarah smiled faintly. "We'll handle this our way." I thought that was it. The end of the story. But it wasn't even close. The next evening, just after sundown, something slid through our mail slot. A thick cream envelope embossed with the Silver Pines Homeowners Association logo. Inside was a printed fine notice. Amount due 200 our supposed violation. The font of your house numbers is not HOA approved. I blinked at the page, reading it twice. Apparently, in this neighborhood, even digits had dress codes. At the bottom was a signature written with smug flourish. Greg Bennett, HOA president. I could practically hear his voice in my head. The same arrogance his son carried in his slap. Sarah skimmed the notice once and exhaled slowly. This isn't random, she said. It's calculated. I nodded, holding the letter over the dinner table. They're sending a message. And that was the moment it clicked. The fight at school wasn't the end. It was the trigger. And now the people running this picture-perfect neighborhood were gearing up for something far uglier. Because the next time I caught their son on camera, he wasn't holding a lunch tray. He was holding a can of spray paint. Don't miss what happens next. Hit subscribe and stay tuned with Tomato Tales as the real battle for truth begins. The next few days felt uneasy. We thought the $200 fine was petty payback, maybe the end of it. But it was only the opening move in a game we didn't know we were playing. That Friday night, I was half watching an action movie when my phone buzzed. The doorbell camera notification lit up the screen. A figure in a hoodie was creeping up our walkway. I tapped the feed when my stomach dropped. It was Chase Bennett. He wasn't carrying books. He was holding a can of spray paint. Through the grainy night vision, I watched him glance around like a guilty raccoon, then shake the can and start tagging our front path. The letters were sloppy, half-formed, like even his vandalism lacked conviction. Then before leaving, he looked straight into the lens. 3 perfect seconds of full face, glowing in infrared. It was the clearest evidence I'd ever seen. I saved the clip, downloaded it twice, and backed it up to 3 drives. When I went to bed, I felt certain the nightmare was almost over. We had proof, undeniable, time-stamped, and recorded. In the morning, I emailed the video directly to Greg Bennett, the HOA president himself. I didn't bother adding commentary. The footage spoke louder than any threat. For the first time in days, I sipped my coffee with confidence. That confidence lasted less than 24 hours. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, Sarah was already at her laptop, face pale. "You need to see this," she said. On the screen was a post from the private Silver Pines community forum, run by none other than Karen Bennett, Greg's wife. At the top, concerned neighbors, we need to talk about vandalism. Attached was a short video clip, grainy, cropped, and deceptively edited. It showed the same graffiti on our walkway, followed by Lena, coming home from school and stepping toward the door. The post cut right there, timed perfectly to make it look like she had done it. Hundreds of angry comments poured in. Unbelievable. Kids these days have no respect. Parents should be ashamed. People we'd waved to at the mailbox were suddenly calling for punishment. And there, buried in the thread, was Karen's comment. "We're addressing this directly with the family. We take pride in our community standards." I felt my chest tighten. They hadn't just lied. They'd weaponized the neighborhood against us, but across the table, Sarah's voice was calm. "Good," she said, typing rapidly. "They left fingerprints all over this. What are you doing?" I asked, archiving every comment, every edit, every timestamp. "We're documenting everything." She looked up, eyes cold. "They think lies move faster than the truth. Only if the truth stands still. They thought they could frame a 16-year-old girl and get away with it. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Keep watching. Hit subscribe and stay with Tomato Tales to see how one fake video turned into a digital war. From that morning on, our house became a command center. Sarah took over the dining table, her laptop glowing late into the night. Every screenshot, every comment, every edit from that HOA forum, she saved them all. Our printer whirred until midnight, spitting out page after page of proof. "They think they're clever," she said, flipping through printed posts. "But every lie they tell leaves a footprint. All we have to do is follow it. The next week, the Bennetts started pushing harder. It began with another notice, taped right to our front door this time. Violation. Lawn exceeds height standards by 1/4 inch. Fine, $50 2 days later. Another. Violation. Grass appears unnaturally green. Possible use of unapproved fertilizer. We laughed at first. Then the fines started coming daily. The same board member, a nervous man named Todd, came by every afternoon, slapping notices onto our door with thick strips of packing tape that peeled the paint when we removed them. One afternoon, I opened the door mid-stick. "Afternoon," I said flatly. "You missed a spot." He froze halfway through his job. "Just following procedure," he mumbled. "Per HOA Rule 3.4a. Sarah called from the living room without even looking up. "Delivery must be through the mailbox, Todd." He blinked, swallowed, and carefully slid the paper into the mailbox instead. "Thank you," Sarah added sweetly. "We'll rate your service 5 beige stars." That night over dinner, Lena smirked. "So we're in a turf war with an HOA?" "Not a war," Sarah said, tapping her pen. "An audit. She had a plan." She always did. Instead of fighting their rules, we used them. The next day, I installed the ugliest legal mailbox font I could find. A curly, cartoonish serif that made our address look like it belonged to a circus. Ugly, yes, but HOA approved. Then came the welcome mat. We'd gotten a violation for our old one, which apparently was too inviting. So I replaced it with a plain black mat that read, "Oh no." "Not you again," Sarah snorted when she saw it. "Petty," she said. "Perfect," I replied. The following week, our front door looked like a patchwork quilt. Every ripped bit of paint from Todd's tape replaced by a perfect square of HOA-approved beige. By the end of the month, it looked like modern art. And every square drove Greg Bennett insane. He'd slow his SUV every time he passed our house, glaring at that polka-dotted door like it was a personal insult. "Small victories," Sarah said, sipping her coffee. But her eyes told me she knew this wasn't over. Because bullies don't stop when they're ignored. They double down when you start. Laughing, we thought we'd found a way to fight, back with humor. But their next move would hit closer to home than any fine ever could. Don't miss the turning point. Hit subscribe and stay with Tomato Tales as this neighborhood feud takes a darker turn. I always thought the feud would stay between adults. HOA meetings, emails, and ridiculous fines. But I was wrong, because when people like the Bennetts feel cornered, they don't stop at rules. They go after what you love most. It started with a call from the middle school. Our son Eli was in the nurse's office, shaken, pale, and trembling. When I arrived, I saw him sitting on the cot, clutching his backpack like a shield. He wasn't bleeding, but his voice was small, and he cornered me. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Chase Bennett," he said. He said if Lena doesn't apologize for lying, he'll teach me manners. That was it. That was the moment something in me broke. The staff said they'd handle it internally. Apparently, handle it meant pretend it didn't happen. I walked out of that building with Eli's hand in mine, feeling that quiet, shaking kind of anger that doesn't yell. It plans. When we got home, Sarah was already at the dining table, her evidence folders stacked like towers. I told her what happened. She didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Then quietly, "They've dragged the kids into this now." That night, our house felt different, still tense. Lena didn't joke at dinner. "Eli just pushed his food around. Why are they like this?" he finally asked. I sighed. "Because people who are scared of being exposed will do anything to control the story." The next morning, Lena walked into the kitchen wearing her hoodie, earbuds dangling. "I'm not scared of him," she said. Sarah smiled faintly. "I know, but be smart. Cameras, corners, witnesses, always." And that's when I realized how far we'd fallen. We weren't living in a neighborhood anymore. We were living in occupied territory. That afternoon, I installed new cameras, higher quality, wider angles, and motion alerts linked directly to my phone. Every light, every sound, every shadow that moved on our property now had eyes on it. 2 nights later at 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Motion detected in driveway. I opened the app expecting a stray cat. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 figures, hooded, laughing. One of them holding a bucket. They crept up to our car, and then came the splash. In the glow of the motion light, bright red paint streamed down the hood like blood. And before running off, one of them turned toward the camera and flipped it off. Even through the mask, I knew that stance. The slouch, the smug tilt of the head. Chase Bennett, again. The next morning, everyone on the street saw that paint. But by noon, the story they were told made us the villains. Stay tuned. Hit subscribe and stick with Tomato Tales to see how one act of vandalism turned an entire neighborhood against us. The morning after the paint attack, I woke up to whispers. Not just online, in person. Neighbors who used to wave now pretended not to see us. Some slowed their walks just to stare at the red-streaked car sitting in our driveway. The color still dripping down the front bumper like fresh blood. Sarah had already been up for hours, scrolling through the community forum. Her face was pale with disbelief. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. The Bennetts had posted again, this time claiming we'd vandalized our own car for attention. "Some people will do anything for sympathy," Karen had written, followed by a winking emoji. The thread already had over 200 comments. Every few seconds, another one appeared. Always knew that family was trouble. Attention seekers. Why don't they just move? And then came the final twist of the knife. An announcement. Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Attendance mandatory. I didn't need a crystal ball to know what that was about. That evening, the neighborhood clubhouse buzzed like a courtroom. Every folding chair was filled. Every face pointed our way. Greg Bennett stood at the front, wearing his signature smug grin and holding a folder thicker than a phone book. "Thank you for coming," he began. "As you know, recent behavior from certain residents has caused disruptions within our peaceful community." He didn't need to name us. Every eye in the room already had. He clicked a remote, and on the projector appeared the edited video, the same cropped clip that made it look like Lena had been the vandal. Then side by side, photos of our red-smeared car. "The Bennetts have faced unprovoked hostility," Greg said. "And as HOA president, I can't ignore the pattern." I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. Sarah, though, stayed calm. She always did. When he finally opened the floor for comments, she raised her hand. "Permission to speak?" she asked. Greg smirked. "Go ahead." Sarah stood holding a folder, thinner than his, but 10 times sharper. "Since you enjoy visuals, Greg, let's add some context." She handed a USB drive to the AV operator. A new clip appeared on screen. Our original footage. Clear. Unedited. Chase Bennett's face illuminated under the security light as he vandalized our walkway. Then the timestamp. Then the clip of our car being drenched in red paint. Same hoodie, same sneakers, same laugh. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Greg stammered. That could be doctored." "Funny," Sarah said coolly, "because we also provided copies to the police, the school district, and our lawyer." The room went silent. Even Karen's confident smile cracked for the first time. I looked around, seeing confusion spread through the neighbors' faces. Doubt, shame, realization. We hadn't won the war. Not yet. But for the first time, the Bennetts weren't the ones in control. That night, as we walked home under the glow of porch lights, Sarah slipped her hand into mine. "Let them squirm," she whispered. I nodded. "We'll keep everything documented. No more silence." But just as I started to feel the first flicker of hope, my phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. You should have kept your mouth shut. The next morning, we found something in our yard that proved this fight was far from over, and that message wasn't an empty threat. The text, "You should have kept your mouth shut," replayed in my head all night. I told myself it was just empty talk, someone trying to scare us. But when morning came, fear turned to proof. Sarah opened the front door just after sunrise. She didn't scream, she just froze. I rushed over, coffee still in my hand, and looked down. Sitting on our front lawn, right beside the walkway, was a brick wrapped in plastic. Taped to it, a single printed note. Lies spread fast. Windows break faster. I looked up, scanning the quiet row of perfect lawns and pastel mailboxes. Every house looked the same, peaceful, normal. But now every window felt like an eye watching us. Sarah picked up the brick with gloved hands. "Print ink. Probably from their home office," she said. Her voice didn't shake, but her fingers did. We called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived, young and polite, their cruiser gleaming under the morning sun. They took photos, bagged the note, and promised to check the neighborhood footage. When I mentioned the Bennetts, the officers exchanged a glance. One of them said carefully, "We're familiar with prior reports from this address." I raised an eyebrow. "From them or from us?" He didn't answer. By noon, the story had already hit the neighborhood group chat, except somehow the narrative had flipped again. Karen's newest post claimed we'd staged the threat for attention. "It's sad when families make up drama, just to stay relevant," she wrote, attaching a picture of a different brick, not ours. I watched the comment count rise like smoke. 80, 100, 200, each one more poisonous than the last. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room watching the security feed on a loop, waiting for something, anything, to move. Then just past 1 a.m., motion alert. Backyard camera, I clicked it open and saw Greg Bennett himself. He wasn't alone. Another man and his HOA enforcer, Todd, stood beside him. They were shining flashlights through our fence, whispering, pacing. Greg pointed toward our windows, gesturing angrily. My pulse pounded in my ears. I hit record and saved the footage instantly. Sarah appeared beside me, half asleep, now wide-eyed. She stared at the screen. "He's actually on our property." "Not for long," I muttered, dialing 911. By the time the police arrived, they were gone, but the camera had caught everything. The officers promised to review the footage and issue a warning. A warning. That's all. As they drove off, Sarah leaned against the door frame. "They're not going to stop," she said softly. Her tone wasn't fearful, it was final. That's when I realized something. The Bennetts had power because they played dirty, and if we wanted to end this, we'd have to play smart. The next day, Sarah came to me with a plan. Not revenge, but something far more devastating. And once it started, there was no turning back. When Sarah says she has a plan, you don't interrupt. You just listen. She'd spent the night combing through the Silver Pines HOA bylaws, hundreds of pages of fine print written in legal gibberish, meant to confuse anyone who dared to challenge them. By dawn, she had sticky notes covering the dining room wall like a detective board. "Greg Bennett built his power through fear," she said, tapping one of the notes. "We're going to tear it apart with paperwork." I stared at her wall of chaos, arrows, printouts, color codes, and realized something. She wasn't planning revenge. She was planning justice. By noon, she'd already filed 3 public record requests: property taxes, HOA financial disclosures, and neighborhood expenditure reports. Within 24 hours, we had what we needed. Greg wasn't just strict, he was sloppy. Over the past 2 years, HOA funds had disappeared into vague categories like beautification projects and miscellaneous improvements. Except Those projects all happened to involve Greg's brother-in-law's construction company. Sarah smirked. Conflict of interest. Classic. She kept digging, cross-referencing names, receipts, even timestamps on neighborhood invoices. Every page she uncovered was another crack in Greg's pristine image. That night, she called me into the dining room. Her laptop screen glowed in the dark, displaying an email draft addressed to every resident of Silver Pines. Subject: where your HOA fees are really going. My stomach twisted. You're going to send that? Not yet, she said. We're going to let him walk into his own trap first. Her plan was genius and ruthless. She'd discovered a clause buried deep in the bylaws. If the HOA president fails to disclose personal financial conflicts, a special meeting can be called for immediate removal. All we needed were signatures from 10% of homeowners. Think we can get that many? I asked. Sarah smiled. Greg made a lot of enemies while policing mailbox colors. Trust me, they'll sign. Over the next week, we went door to door. At first, people hesitated, afraid of retaliation. But once Sarah showed them the proof, the receipts, the payments, the screenshots, the tide turned fast. By Friday, we had 20 signatures. By Sunday, 47. Enough to call a meeting and shake the foundation Greg built his empire on. That night, Sarah sat back in her chair, exhausted but glowing with determination. You know what the best part is? She said. He made these rules himself. We're just following them. For the first time in weeks, I laughed, really laughed. 'Cause it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about balance. But we didn't know Greg had already caught wind of our plan. And his next move would hit harder than anything before. Just when we thought we had him cornered, Greg found a way to turn the entire HOA against us. Again. But this time we were ready. For a few days things were quiet. Too quiet. No new fines, no emails. Not even a glare from the Bennett's front porch. It felt wrong. Like the silence before a storm. Then Monday morning, 3 envelopes landed in our mailbox, all stamped with the HOA seal. Sarah and I opened them together. Notice of violation. Notice of hearing. Notice of expulsion. The first accused us of repeated hostility toward HOA officials. The second summoned us to a disciplinary meeting in 3 days' time. And the third, the boldest one, declared a proposal to revoke our neighborhood membership entirely. Meaning, no voting rights, no access to HOA services, and a $2,000 penalty fee. They're trying to exile us, Sarah muttered, flipping through the pages. He's pulling the whole board behind him. I clenched my fists. So we fight it? Oh, we will, she said, her voice low and steady. But on our terms. The following evening, the smear campaign began. Karen Bennett was back online, only this time she wasn't posting. She was emailing. Dozens of neighbors received a message from her personal account. The subject line read, "Protecting our community from the Daltons." Attached was a photoshopped image, our car, covered in red paint, with a fake timestamp from before the real vandalism happened. She wrote that we'd staged everything to gain sympathy and disrupt the peace. It was textbook manipulation, twisted just enough to sound plausible. The comments started flooding back in. I thought they seemed off. They're troublemakers. Someone should call the cops again. But Sarah didn't flinch. She just smiled. That quiet, dangerous smile that meant she'd already thought 10 steps ahead. Let them talk, she said. They're building our case for us. 2 nights later, the HOA emergency meeting began. The clubhouse was packed. Greg stood at the front again, smug as ever, tapping the microphone. Tonight, he said, we'll be addressing the Dalton family's repeated violations and acts of aggression. I could feel my pulse in my ears. He waved his folder dramatically, his so-called evidence, fake screenshots, altered images, statements from loyal neighbors. But before he could start the charade, Sarah rose from her chair and spoke. Mr. Bennett, she said calmly, Before you proceed, I'd like to submit an addendum to the board. In compliance with HOA Section 5, Article 7, Greg blinked. Excuse me? She handed the clerk a flash drive and a stack of printed documents. Full financial audit of Silver Pines, including your transactions with Bennett Property Solutions. Gasps filled the room. Even the board members exchanged nervous glances. Greg's face drained of color. Where did you— It's all public record, Sarah interrupted, her tone razor sharp. You made it easy. For the first time since we'd moved into Silver Pines, Greg Bennett had nothing to say. When we left that night, neighbors didn't look at us with suspicion. They looked at Greg, and for once he was the one under the microscope. But power doesn't die quietly, and the Bennetts still had one more card to play. Just when the truth started spreading, someone tried to erase the proof, permanently. The night after the meeting, the air in Silver Pines felt different. Quiet, but heavy, like the calm before a fuse meets the flame. Sarah and I thought the worst was over. Greg had been humiliated publicly, his corruption exposed, but people like him don't go down quietly. At 1:37 a.m., our cameras pinged again. Motion detected. Driveway. I grabbed my phone, my heart sinking. The feed came up, static for a second, then nothing but black. Every camera in the system had gone offline at once. Sarah sat up in bed instantly. Power cut. No, just the cameras. We rushed to the window. A faint orange glow flickered from the side of the house. Not bright enough to be fire, but enough to turn my stomach cold. I bolted outside, flashlight in hand, barefoot on the pavement. The smell hit me first. Gasoline. Someone had doused the trash cans and tossed a half-burned match pack nearby. The flames hadn't caught, but the intent was clear. Sarah was on the phone with 911 before I even said a word. By the time the firefighters arrived, the evidence was smoking but intact. Melted plastic, charred paper, and one key piece they left behind, a glove. Black leather. And inside, a tiny HOA-issued keychain tag, embossed with the Silver Pines logo. The police were done treating it as a neighborly dispute. They called it what it was, attempted arson. The next morning, Greg Bennett's house looked like a fortress. Curtains drawn, car gone. But his wife Karen, she couldn't stay quiet. She posted again. Some people will do anything to frame innocent families. Truly disgusting. It backfired instantly. Neighbors who'd seen Sarah's evidence began turning on them in the comments. One even posted, "Funny. I saw Greg near the Daltons' house last night. Care to explain?" By noon, the Bennett's empire was cracking from the inside. Board members resigned one by one. The emergency vote they'd tried to call to expel us, canceled. Sarah handed everything to the police and our lawyer. Every screenshot, every video, every fine, every threat. When I asked her how she felt, she didn't smile. She just said, exhausted, but not done. That night we sat on the porch, the same porch where this all started, watching the flashing red and blue lights fade down the street. Lena joined us quietly. She sat between us, tucking her knees under her chin. "So, we won?" she asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, we just stopped losing." I looked out at the neighborhood, neat lawns, glowing windows, and somewhere in the dark, the faint sound of sirens. The facade of peace had cracked, and for the first time, Silver Pines looked real. But even after the Bennetts vanished from the neighborhood, one final surprise showed up in our mailbox, proof that their downfall wasn't an accident. It was planned. A week after the fire, peace finally started to return to Silver Pines. No new fines, no hate posts, no midnight shadows creeping by the window. Greg Bennett had resigned from the HOA, citing personal health reasons. Everyone knew what that really meant. The police had opened a full investigation. Fraud, harassment, and attempted arson. The Bennett's house sat dark now, their perfect lawn uncut, their mailbox stuffed with letters no one dared to claim. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt lighter. I thought it was over. Until one morning I opened our own mailbox and found a single white envelope. No return address, no name. Just one word written in neat handwriting. Sorry. I brought it inside and handed it to Sarah. She opened it carefully, like it might shatter in her hands. Inside was a short note, typed on plain paper. You don't know me, but I've been part of the board for years. Greg made us follow orders we didn't believe in. After your daughter's video, I started saving things. Files, emails, copies of his transactions. I gave them to your lawyer last week. It's over now. I just wanted you to know you weren't fighting alone. At the bottom, no name. Just an initial. T. Sarah stared at the letter for a long time. Then she smiled. That quiet, tired kind of smile you give when a storm finally breaks. I knew someone had to be watching, she said. I looked out the window toward the Bennett's empty driveway. For months, that house had been a symbol of control, of intimidation, of everything wrong with this place. Now it was just another quiet home on a quiet street. That evening, we sat on the porch again. Me, Sarah, Lena, and Eli. The sky was orange, the air calm, and for once, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt earned. Do you think it's really over? Lena asked. Sarah nodded. Maybe not for them, but for us, yes. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This neighborhood was supposed to be perfect, I said. Guess perfection isn't peace. Sarah smiled softly. No, it's just paint. Eventually, it cracks. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, I looked at our house. Our messy, imperfect, scarred home. And for the first time since we'd moved to Silver Pines, it actually felt like ours. And sometimes the real villains don't live in dark alleys or haunted houses. Sometimes they live right next door. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe and stay tuned with Tomato Tales, where every story starts simple and ends unforgettable.